New York's classic rock, Q1043.
This meeting is being recorded.
I know, so,
Okay,
so we can't tell our normal dirty jokes. How are you?
Oh.
It's great to see you.
good. I've got my guitar in the background. Look.
Excellent.
Okay, but mine's a real one.
And this will be short and sweet. This will be easy.
Yeah, good. It's just let me put some lights on for the Steve thing. Cutting room. It's a like I've never done it before. It's just going to be me and a guitar.
That's
Me
what I
and
was
a
going to
guitar
ask.
and Vance and a guitar. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen you with a band. I've seen you play, sort of the Herman's Hermit show, but I never saw you just with your guitar doing songs and stories.
It's an interesting concept. We did it once, a couple of times. We've done it like at private parties, and it's very successful because it's a very freedom. There's no set list and there's no 1, 2, 3, 4. We just start and we called it when we did it before. We called it the Wandering Minstrel Show.
It's kind of what it
And
is.
I'd walk around the tables and sing. And now we don't know what's going to happen with the social distancing thing. We don't know what it's going to be like.
Well, all my friends who tour, like New York City, knock wood, has been great. We opened up, transmission rates are really low. We can do, full on, it's less than 0.5%. But as I try to explain to the audience, you're not just doing one show, you want to tour, you want to do multiple shows. And that's the problem with all my friends in the UK. How do they book a tour when you don't know what's going to happen in Europe, that you don't know what UK is? The
Yeah.
logistics of it seems very, very hard.
Yeah, so we're just going to wing it, back to winging it instead of having like a concept show with a beginning and I'm going to finish probably with "There's a Kind of Hush All Over the World" because there's no way to follow that song.
Right.
And right before that will be Henry VIII, and everybody will sing along. And as always, I open with "I'm Into Something Good." It just won't be with the whole band. And some of the songs play better without everybody bashing away.
Well, you can sort of dig into it, and I get more Peter Noone. I get more of your emotion to it. Plus, you're a wonderful storyteller, and to me, that's a big deal. When people bring you in to their world, whether it's Paul McCartney or Bruce Springsteen, it doesn't matter the size or scope of the artist. That when you tell us, "Hey, here's what was going on. Here's how this song," funny story about this. We love that because we've seen the shows. But now it feels like we're hanging in your living room, and you're telling us and making us confidence.
And some of my stories are true, Ken.
Some.
But that's what happened. The couple, we did one in Texas, and what happened was that the audience felt able to participate. It wasn't like interrupting. I would stop and I say, "Well, anybody want a song does anybody want to hear a song that we don't know how to play?" And people would shout out like album tracks, and we don't do the guitar solos, we
Right.
just get the song. But we did "This Door Swings Both Ways" and "Don't Go Out Into the Rain," songs that we don't do in the main show because they weren't big hits in America. So the idea in a concert is to do all your big hits, and so we even did like "Sleepy Joe" and "Years May Come," which were never released even in America. They were just big British hits.
One
So
of the
it's good fun for me. I enjoy the whole concept because I told my friend who's also in show business what I was doing, and he said it'll be invigorating.
Sure, because
The
when it's
fear
just
factor.
you, it's like stand-up comedy. When it's just you, there's no hiding. It's you and your rapport with the audience. Last time I saw you, it's just one of the funniest stories. And if you don't want to mention it now, it's fine. But when you explained the story of Herman's Hermit's greatest hits, I just absolutely fell on the floor when they titled your album Greatest
Yeah,
Hits.
the one where I say the first out. Well, I get it. I have a copy of it on stage with me all the time because I'll just show you. I don't have a copy here. I've got a David Bowie album, but wait. You know what? What it is was that it has this picture of me on the back of it. You see that magic picture. So I always
Right.
I always do that. And the picture is taken on the Ed Sullivan Show. It actually is a
Sure.
live
Yeah.
shot of the Ed Sullivan Show. And I know that by the suit, you know, you can see the clothes that I bought that specially for the Ed Sullivan Show. And then I make a joke that, you know, interestingly enough, our label in America, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, called our first album "The Best of Herman's Hermits," and that's it. It's a bit, you know, and
That's a confidence booster. That's a big confidence booster for you.
And you know what? The ABKCO owned ABKCO, you know, Alan Klein company,
Right.
but owned the rights to this MGM record. And I thought what would be great was so I got in touch with them and asked them to remake that same Best of Herman's Hermits, but put the tracks on it that I wanted. So they remade this album with this cover, with all the tracks on all the hits, all the American hits on it. So it's got like I'm leaning on a lamppost, because that wasn't on this. We hadn't recorded it by then. So it's very good to be able to do it. And you know, our first album, the reality was that we, as everybody did in those days, your first album was all the songs that you did in your set list that nobody else had recorded.
Right.
So you couldn't do Roll Over Beethoven, and you couldn't do I'm a Hog for Your Baby, and you couldn't do Some Other Guy, and you couldn't do Ain't That Just Like Me, because all the other Mersey beat British invasion bands had already done that. They were doing different songs in the south of England, but all the bands that we knew in the north of England were all playing those same songs. So our first album had all like weird stuff on it. At the Cavern, we used to do My Boy Lollipop, which,
of course,
which was kind of an odd song to do, but it was a great song to play. You know, My Boy Lollipop. But, you know, Mickey Most didn't. Yeah, Mickey Most didn't think that was a good song to do.
I bet it was a huge hit, though. Hey, tell me about playing the Cavern. You know, this is Northern England, where, you know, I've always heard like the South always thought it was a joke that if you're from the North, you know, and I try to explain that vibe of what Londoners thought of people, oh, they're chimney sweeps, or they're just kids, or, you know, they thought of it. I mean, listen, for the Beatles to be rejected, but given the comedy producer, when you give them, you know, Spike's, you know, comedy record, because it must be a joke if it's a music band from Liverpool or Manchester, where you are. Did you ever feel like they never took you seriously? Did you feel like that when you get to London, it was a gag?
You know, I don't know what I'm sure in every city in the world there is a club like the Cavern and like the Oasis, and the stepping stone to success, CBGB, somewhere in New York, somewhere in Seattle, the stepping stone to success always had that place in it, and it was the Oasis in Manchester. If you finally got to the Oasis in Manchester, the next step was to get to the Cavern in Liverpool, and when we got to the Cavern in Liverpool, we were still very young. It's kind of interesting because one of the things about the Cavern that people don't know is there were three types of Cavern performance. There was lunchtime sessions where, strangely enough, I don't know if it ever happened in America, but strangely enough, girls who worked in offices and in retail, at lunchtime, they would go to a place like the Cavern or the Plaza in Manchester. There were many dance places, and they would dance alone and eat their sandwich and a cup of tea, you know, and there would be a band on, and the band was probably some sort of draw, you know,
right.
So we would get that one, and because we'd decided that we were all in, you know, it was an all-in band. We were not going to have jobs, and if we did jobs, they couldn't interfere with playing. And so we would do the lunchtime, and then, you know, I ask about it all the time because I need to know all the information, and it's kind of a long time ago. And I say, why did we get so many gigs at the Cavern? And well, Bob Wooler liked you, and Bob Wooler was the guy who booked the Cavern. And he liked Herman's Hermits, or Herman and the Hermits, or Pete Novak and the Heartbeats, all the different names of the bands that played there. And we were playing the lunchtime one, and then they had a thing. So there's a lunchtime one. Then at 4:30, there was a thing called Junior Cavern, which was something that the local councils in England had set up so that everybody in my generation at the time, their mothers and fathers worked.
Sure.
Both parents worked. You could not survive in post-war England without a lot of money. So both my parents worked. So they set up the local council set up these places where people would be going, they'd be safe and they'd be kept out of trouble. And that was included popular music, which now sounds incredible because probably the most unsafe place you can be. There's going to be drugs and there's going to be trouble is where they've got rock and roll music. But in pop music wasn't like that. So once again, at 4:30, we'd have another job where you would sing and, you'd sing and girls would dance, and bit by bit, a few more boys would start to come. What happened was there were two different kinds of boys in England. There were the Teddy Boys,
right,
who you didn't want at a concert because they only liked Jerry Lee Lewis, Fats Domino, Elvis Presley, and they may accept Ricky Nelson. So there was that team. And then we drew those kind of, we called mods,
right, the
well-dressed
mods and the
young men. Yeah,
right,
well-dressed young men.
Yeah,
which were the opposite of the Teds. And they were, suited up. They probably worked at retail.
I always thought it was so clear, the early Beatles pictures of them trying to look like James Dean, everybody wearing black leather and T-shirts, in their Hamburg days. Yeah. And Brian Epstein comes along and says, none of that. We're going to have nice suits and you're going to bow at the end of the song. And, the look, your look, Billy J. Kramer, everybody were in a suit and a tie, and we're going to look like that. It seemed like that was the Hollies, everybody seemed to be, we're wearing suits and ties. We're not going to be Elvis. We're not going to be Jailhouse Rock anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Just what mods was kind of a change, and it included young boys who were not afraid to go. I was one of them, so I understand the whole logic of it. So you could go and you could stand on the other side of a dance hall and you'd dress your best because you thought that girls would notice that. And it was like, it really wasn't fashion. It was, I am this type.
I'm in this club.
So there you go. So yeah. I was a bit of a mix, to tell you the truth, because I thought I was more of a Teddy boy, but I dressed as a mod because that seemed to be more popular with the girls, basically. Older girls like Teddy boys. So
that is the only motivating reason any teenager or young man in his 20s ever needs. How should I dress for the girls? Thank you. That's what I'll do.
Exactly. Because I mean, until I got in a band, I had a jacket from Jackson's to Taylor, which came down to my knees, and I wore the tightest, and it had a purple jacket interior, which was like really sexy. Cool. No Americans dressed like that, but we thought we were dressing like Americans. And, and you either got a thing called brothel creepers, which were these big fat shoes like brothel creepers.
Brothel creepers. Got it.
Yeah. And skin tight trousers and a shirt with like a tassel down the front, like a cowboy thing. No Americans ever dressed with all these mystery things.
It was just your concept, your mind of what it was.
And I missed the brothel creepers because they were not popular with the kind of girls I liked. And I got a pair of winkle pickers, which were shoes with the longest toes. If you kicked somebody with them, they would die, basically.
Right.
The longest toes. And I would go out like that. But when Herman's Hermits got together, as we metamorphosized into Herman's Hermits, from the Cyclones to Pete Novak and the Heartbeats to Herman and the Hermits to Herman's Hermits, we kind of fashioned ourselves on, an entertaining and a bunch of, we thought we were entertainers because so by being at the Cavern, we were doing the lunchtime and then the evening show, we were playing a lot more gigs than anybody else. So we were getting better quickly, and we were getting. And it didn't matter how good you were because you needed a following, and no label followed you. It didn't matter how good you were, how many auditions you passed, and you had to have a following because they were only interested in finding somebody to replace the Beatles. That's all
Beatles
they cared
were on their way, and we have to feed the machine, feed the tank.
So these guys are popular in Manchester now. We're popular in Manchester and Liverpool and Bolton and Leeds, and we've got this following, and it's not a big following, but it is called a following. So we audition. We do the same as the Beatles. Basically, we audition for all the labels, and they don't sign us because to be honest, we probably weren't good enough. If you hear the stuff, you go, oh my God, what were we thinking? How naive could you possibly be? But I'd had the great fortune to have seen the Beatles live in 1963 in a field near my grandmother's. and I don't know how you say, awesome and blown away. All those things have all been used so much, but it was mind blowing. It was,
Peter,
oh,
every single person has told me the same words, the same story, from John Lodge, your Philip Moody Blues,
yeah.
to Billy J. Everyone said the same thing, that there was just something about them on stage that when you saw them, you knew you were seeing the best.
Well, I know what it was, and I went with we had a band and we were called Pete Novak and the Heartbeats, and I went with my bass player, and on the bill was, I think, the Mavericks, and then Brian Poole and the Tremolos, who are also, and they were absolutely brilliant, but they were kind of trapped in another period. They kind of did steps while they were singing, and they moved backwards and forwards. The Beatles didn't. The Beatles came on, and you could tell. This is the thing. You could tell that the Beatles liked each other, and that they were like a rugby team. They had this unique thing. They looked at each other during the songs and laughed, and probably when they made a mistake, they laughed. And while they were playing the second song, I don't remember any of the songs because it was so like that, and the audience were not as mesmerized as I was. The audience were it was a fairgrounds, and there was a lot of stuff going on, checking out the birds and everything, but they loved each other, and they were singing, and they would step forward and take the microphone, and everybody was there like a football team. They were all back, Marines, whatever you want to say. There was this sort of, and they joyfully looked at each other, and they were laughing and enjoying it and everything. And the my bass player, just during the second song, said to me, "We're fucked." And I didn't know what he meant really. But then when the show was over and we were walking home, which wasn't far, by the way, it was near my grandmother's. I lived with my grandmothers. When we were walking home, he told me that, there's not a chance that we could, aspirations, I think, wouldn't be a word if he'd have known a word that long. So he kind of dropped out. He didn't mind being in the band, but he didn't ever want to make a record. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't going to be that good enough to make a record.
It was for fun. It was for 20 quid, maybe meeting the birds, but it wasn't a commitment. It
exactly.
You told this story once. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Tell me, I may be misremembering. So, memories start to go. I believe there was once that you told me this story, that when you saw them, one of the things about the Beatles is that they just ran on stage, put on their instruments and played, and boom, they were on and playing in 2 seconds. And you had turned to your bandmates and said, "Can we do that?" Because the energy of them hitting the stage and going.
It's the Beatles at Shea Stadium. I mean, if you see the Beatles at Shea, if you see that, and once again, if you look at any of the still pictures, they're all and by then they were probably massive, and probably it wasn't as easy. They weren't traveling around in a van and sharing the same cigarette and everything. Now they were big. One's dating a model, and one's dating a doctor's son, and they're not those boys that they were 6 months earlier.
Right.
But they're still enjoying it, and they're announced, coming in at number 3 from the, on that horrible tannoy system at Shea Stadium, and they're announced. No music is played. And they run from what is probably where those baseball players run from to get to the pitcher's mound.
Right.
They run and they hit the stage, and there aren't 14 men in black T-shirts standing behind the amplifiers plugging them in. They plug in themselves and they're ready to go with none of that bullshit that's showed up into show business since then. Every day there's another person showing up on the stage, or a firework or something. They had everything. See, the thing about the Beatles which inspired me was they were the whole package. They replaced the big band, who had a girl singer and 3 guy singers, and they replaced all of that, and they did it all themselves. Paul and George sang the girls' parts.
Right. Something. If your fellow countryman there, John Lodge from the Moody Blues, he said we were what El Riot and the Rebels, I think his first band was, and he said, here's the thing that nobody else seems to mention, is that all we knew was, here's Buddy Holly and the Crickets. Here's Cliff Richard and the
Yeah.
Shadows. And for the first time, here was the Beatles. He said we always saw a guy in front who was handsome singing and 3-4 guys behind him playing. He goes, 3 mics in the front. We'd never seen 3 mics in the front. And well, which one's the singer? He said, well, this one's, wait, now this one's singing. Wait, which one? And he said, I turned to my bandmate and said, can you sing? He said, I can't sing. He said, like what your bandmate said, we have to change this up, because that one guy standing in like this isn't going to cut it anymore. Even with you as the lead singer, it wasn't Peter Noone and the Hermits, it was Hermits.
Well, different. When I saw the Beatles in August 1963, John Lennon was the lead singer and the other 3 were members of his band.
Really?
Oh,
Really?
absolutely. No question. It was on, and at the end of the show, when they stopped, they all went to whatever, 3 of them went, and John Lennon came and spoke to all, mostly boys at the front of the stage. It's kind of interesting. It was already changing. The people there were a bunch of 14, 15, I mean, I got pictures of it. Somebody had a camera there. I've got a picture of the ticket for the show, and somebody had a camera there, and you can see John like cajoling, whatever that is that he did so brilliantly. He was a friendly guy. See, no one ever tells you this. The Beatles were really nice guys. Everybody says, well, they were so charming to if you were a young band like Hermit, I was always known as Hermit. Hey, Hermit, what you drinking, right?
That's great.
They were nice to us. They were nice to everybody, and then what happened was they became so massive that they had to be secluded. But
you had no choice.
Then, they were charming, wonderful. They were so pleased that they'd made it. They had a good idea. And, maybe Brian polished them up a little bit. But that nothing works unless all the parts are in place. Brian was the best thing that ever happened to him. When it was mentioned to Brian, people are calling you an idiot. It was already got the Savile Theatre, because you gave all the publishing away. As people got more and more hip to what the music business, I don't think he ever thought he was in the music business. I thought he just wanted to represent make them famous and help them make great records and all that. So when said that, he goes, Peter, they were all my partners. The music publisher, if I didn't give them some of the music publishing, they wouldn't have been as excited as they were. If I didn't give that guy in Kennedy at JFK a t-shirt, a big bite of the t-shirts, there wouldn't have been 10,000 people there. If we didn't give the radio station a taste of all the, you see, it was planned like Colonel Parker. Everybody thinks everybody's an idiot, but you can't be an idiot and go that far.
You're right. You can't get that far without it. Peter Noone, my guest, these incredible stories, and your voice is still so beautiful. And I'm not saying that to blow smoke. I love seeing you perform. And we get you tonight at the Cutting Room, which is reopening. That's my home away from home. We do live breakfast with the Beatles there on Sunday mornings for their birthdays and things. And I miss having done it this past year. And whoever's in town stops by to sing and play or share a story or something. And I love doing it. And we're so glad getting back to live music again. Oh, thank God that we get this, because my feeling was always that was the pressure release valve that was missing this past year. When we go to a show, it could be a heavy metal show or Peter Noone or anything. You don't ask the guy next to you, hey, are you who did you vote for? Or you're just singing along. And it's that whether it's a sporting event or whether it's a concert, you got your arm around the bloke next to you and you have a beer and you're enjoying yourself. And taking that away from us, I think drove UK here all over the Western world. Like that's been the hard part.
Ken, I've done a couple of things since then. I did this one-man show all through the thing because I cannot stop. I'm a persistent little chip, and I kept doing shows. I went and did them private parties with 50 people, socially distanced, and they were all relieved. The relief of somebody daring to go, and people threatened me. They said, you're going to kill people, all that stuff. But that was all politics. I think that music is an outstanding thing. I don't know if you're old enough, but I remember when I first started and people would say, I'm in love with John Lennon. And the girl said, well, you can't have John. I've already got John. You can only have George. And
Yep.
people chose different people out of the band. Well, somehow it's overcome that. And now we just go and, look, all these, what do you call them? Legends bands, these copycat bands sometimes play the songs better than the original people. But it isn't the same thing, and I figure I got another 10 years and I'm going to do as many gigs as I can over those 10 years. I figure for 10 more years, as long as Mick Jagger's going, I still got 10 years, right?
I mean, look at who continues on. Look at everybody from Mick Jagger. He's not stopping. Paul isn't stopping. Ringo and the All-Stars aren't stopping. And these are your compatriots. These are the people who started with you. And that's why I talk about classic rock, Peter. When I tell you that here we are in 2021, and we have as many, if not more, listeners under the age of 30 than we do over 50. And why is that? Yeah. It's because of the music. It's you and I have not gotten any younger or better looking. You look beautiful, but it's the music that drives through, that cuts through.
No kidding. Yeah, and remember the motivation behind the music is completely different. Remember, try and find a Beatles song from like the first 3 albums that isn't about a boy and a girl falling in love and remember, music was about that, even if it was Bobby Rydell or Elvis Presley, right. I'm Stuck on You. All songs were about people's relationships. And if you go and see a band like the Stones, the same as the Beatles, you can see it on stage that they're playing with each other. They're not all going, when's my guitar solo? They're going, is it? You know what I mean? There's something about rock and roll where you share everything. And if the audience is smart enough to get into that, then the world will go much better. If you're not, I always say, look, the Beatles got all that in a van.
Yeah.
With Mel and Neil. They got all that energy in a van and they've replaced whatever had happened before was all gone. Woody Herman and the Thundering Herd, try and get a gig. The Beatles were now the thing that people go, and they would show up and they were entertaining. It wasn't that they got it in a van. They could show up and I saw them doing a Miracle song and I go, oh my God, I never imagined that song to be done by a boy, like
right, singing girls, Ringo singing girl, yeah.
Yeah, they were just and entertaining, and they talked to the audience between the show and they had fun. Of course, when they became famous, really famous, there was no talking. All their charm and their interaction with the thing, and John, now you get your Cocoa Pops for free and all that stuff is all gone. It was all, but they still loved each other and they still said, can you believe this is happening to us? Look at all these girls screaming. Did you hear that plane go over right now? There was still interaction, and the lucky people who were there got it, because that's something different. That's something special. You can only get that in rock and roll. You can only get that in rock and roll because you go and see a baseball team now, the baseball player, you go, my goodness, he's getting $300 million a hit.
Peter Noone, thank you so much for your time. British Invasion Stories, great music. It's great to be together again. I'll see you tonight at the Cutting Room. Don't be late. Go see Peter Noone. We'll see you there.
See you there. Thanks, Ken. See you later.
New York's classic rock, Q1043.